Um, so on to chapter 29. In particular, today would do the first section. So, Atisha, I still have the rotating screen. I don't know if that's going to be a problem for you. If it is, let me know because I can turn it off
Okay.
if that become interferes in any way with your reading. Hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. This is my name is Jonica, and our reader for today is Atisha. We have a couple ideas that I want to run by you just to stimulate your mind. Um, Notice the uniformity of how all this is assembled. This is actually a pictorial of graphene, which is what pencil lead is made of. This is one, these are carbon, the round balls are carbon atoms, and they're one layer thick, and it's the most amazing material. It's stronger than steel, and it has electrical properties. It's actually using semiconductors. And it illustrates it, for me, a concept that there are no gaps here. And so the Course says there is no way in which a gap could be conceived of in its whole. What just happened? I just popped out there. Excuse me a minute. Technical issues here. And we'll start that over again. Stop share. Let's see. Okay. Don't know why that happened, but these things sometimes they're not so bad considering. Okay, and I still have to share the screen. Okay, so what the Course says is in the reality of God's being, there are no gaps, there are no discontinuities, there are no breaks, that there is perfect integration and unity. And of all the things I've ever seen that depict nature, for me, this works. No gaps, no breaks, no discontinuities. So it's a bit abstract, I understand. But it's symbolic of the no gaps between the creator and his creation. Um, so we're going to read two paragraphs from the previous section before we get into the new material.
Your home is built upon your brother's health, upon his happiness, his sinlessness, and everything his father promised him. No secret promise you have made instead has shaken the foundation of his home. The winds will blow upon it and the rain will beat against it, but with no effect. The world will wash away, and yet this house will stand forever. For its strength lies not within itself alone. It is an ark of safety, resting on God's promise that his son is safe forever in himself. What gap can interpose itself between the safety of this shelter and its source? From here, the body can be seen as what it is, and neither less nor more in worth than the extent to which it can be used to liberate God's Son unto his home. And with this holy purpose is it made a home of holiness a little while, because it shares your Father's will with you.
So this is from the previous section, and it reinforces this idea in the Course called a solid foundation. The Creator has set into motion a type of reality which is a solid foundation. It is secure. You can build your home upon it. It's your eternal home. And while here in time, this is very insightful. This is why I wanted to bring it up again. That the body can then be seen in relationship to this solid foundation. And by having your home in God with this holy purpose, the body is made a home of holiness for a little while because it shares your Father's will with you. And so the body can be holy when it shares the Creator's purpose, when you share in the Creator's purpose. It elevates the purpose to which your mind gives to your body so that you can become a blessing to others and be not only heal yourself, but help others to heal as well. Really beautiful. If you missed that section, the Ark of Safety, I recommend you catch the video.
You who believe there is a little gap between you and your brother, do not see that it is here you are as prisoners in a world perceived to be existing here. The world you see does not exist because the place where you perceive it is not real. The gap is carefully concealed in fog, and misty pictures rise to cover it with vague, uncertain forms and changing shapes, forever insubstantial and unsure. Yet in the gap is nothing. Look at the little gap, and you behold the innocence and emptiness of sin that you will see within yourself when you have lost the fear of recognizing love.
So, in truth, there's the solid foundation of holy reality of the Creator and His creation. The ego's counter narrative to there is there are breaks in that idea. There's interruptions, there's interference, called the little gap between you and your brother. And this is the little gap, the Course would say, is the basis upon which egos relate to one another in the world, thinking you are separate from me. I have my interest, you have your interest, and we don't agree on these things. There's a gap between our intentionality. And in truth, the gap is nothing. And we are encouraged to look at the little gap, to recognize the problem so it can be solved, and behold instead the innocence, and allow ourselves to undo or let go the fear of love. The fear, what are we undoing? The fear of unconditional infinite love, something that you can't control, something that you can't even define or completely understand at this level of understanding. And so that's leads in to our new reading for this session on the beginning of chapter 29.
There is no time, no place, no state where God is absent. There is nothing to be feared. There is no way in which a gap could be conceived of in the wholeness that is His. The compromise the least and the littlest gap would represent in His eternal love is quite impossible. For it would mean His love could harbor just a hint of hate. His gentleness turned sometimes to attack, and His eternal patience sometimes fail. All this do you believe when you perceive a gap between your brother and yourself. How could you trust him then? For he must be deceptive in his love. Be wary then. Let him not come too close and leave a gap between you and his love, through which you can escape if there be need for you to flee. Here is the fear of God most plainly seen.
That last statement, last sentence should catch your attention. Here, because the fear of God is talked about in the Course quite a bit, it's the last obstacle to peace. Here is the fear of God most plainly seen in the little gap between you and your brother. Well, let's see, does it mean your brother, or is it be wary then, let him not come too close? See, okay, a little footnote here. The capitalization of pronouns him and he is left to the publishers, the Ken Wapnick and Helen Schuckman decided which ones should be capitalized. I'm not sure I buy what they capitalized here, because a moment ago they were saying this, when you perceive a gap between your brother and yourself, how could you trust him then? So, it's perhaps a minor point, but I think this him really is in reference to the brother. How could you, that you feel the gap between there? For he must be deceptive. I'm sure it can be read both ways. So that's the truth. And this in either event, whether you perceive it to be your brother or the creator, which are ultimately have the same meaning, that you perceive some kind of distance, some kind of separation, some kind of different interest, a different purpose from your own. And this is the gap where the fear of God can be most plainly seen. And whenever the Course makes statements like this, it's saying, pay attention here. Don't allow this to go unrecognized fear, unrecognized interference. For remember, the Course is not here to teach you what love is. It's here to remove the interference between you and love. And when the fear of God is most plainly seen in this location, that's where our attention is being called to. And so the entire section that we read today is going to focus on this gap. David, you had your hand up.
It appears, Jonathan, in the sentence following that,
yeah,
they capitalize he as well. And I would also agree with your suggestion that maybe that should be, other than the beginning, that should be a small gap as well.
Yeah. Thank you, David. I think so. I'm open-minded to the fact that you can interpret A Course in Miracles in more than one way. And so if someone were really attached to reading it the other way, they could. I'm just, for purposes of what we're trying to illustrate here, the gap between you and your brother is where you see the fear of God most clearly. That's the essential point. That's what the rest of the section is going to draw our attention to. So let's look at the gap between you and your brother, between all of us and each other.
Here is the fear of God most plainly seen. For love is treacherous to those who fear, since fear and hate can never be apart. No one who hates but is afraid of love, and therefore must he be afraid of God. Certain it is he knows not what love means. He fears to love and loves to hate, and so he thinks that love is fearful. Hate is love. This is the consequence the little gap must bring to those who cherish it and think that it is their salvation and their hope.
Would help to understand this paragraph to realize a statement made elsewhere in the course that when you maintain a thought in your mind that you believe in, let's say you form that thought around a very specific instance, like this person who crossed me is mean and ugly and untrustworthy. Well, I'm just making that up on the spur of the moment. That thought that you hold in mind, the course says you cannot limit the power of the application of that thought to the one person, for that becomes a basis for your understanding of what life is all about. And so that thought will promulgate or ripple out, cascade into your other relationships as well. Perhaps it might not be on the surface, perhaps it's on the subsurface of, can I really trust this person? Is this just another example of someone who's mean and not to be trusted? So love becomes treacherous to those who fear, and then we do what the course calls everything goes upside down. He fears to love and loves to hate, and thinks that love is fearful, but hate is love. This is a miscreation of the mind. Clearly, this is not creating along the lines of truth. This is holding a thought, fear, close to you, and by so doing, pushes the thought of genuine love further away from your mind. It's the consequence of those who cherish hate or who cherish fear, and that becomes their basis. Now, we're not talking about specific people. We're talking about a habit of mind that in one way or another has applied to everyone. If we entertain these thoughts, then these are the consequences of it. And that thought, as we said, cannot be limited to the person whom you originally made the judgment about. It will extend to your whole view of reality. And here is where the fear of God is most plainly seen. For you, by being afraid of your brother, you must be afraid of God himself. For God is, remember, when we say afraid of God, we're talking about it. One way of viewing that is being afraid of the way your mind symbolizes and constructs your view of God. Not necessarily the true God, but the way you represent it in your mind. It's a miscreation of the mind, but we know that when you apply the power of your mind to those miscreations, it seems very real.
The fear of God, the greatest obstacle that peace must flow across, has not yet gone. The rest are past, but this one still remains to block your path and make the way to light seem dark and fearful, perilous and bleak. You had decided that your brother is your enemy, sometimes a friend perhaps, provided that your separate interests made your friendship possible a little while, but not without a gap perceived between you and him, lest he turn again into an enemy. Let him come close to you, and you jumped back. As you approached, did he but instantly withdraw? A cautious friendship, and limited in scope and carefully restricted in amount, became the treaty that you made with him. Thus, you and your brother but shared a qualified entity in which a clause of separation was a point you both agreed to keep intact. And violating this was thought to be a breach of treaty not to be allowed.
Just a little footnote, a qualified entente is a French term that speaks to an informal alliance and informal arrangement. So the idea is that when we feel separate towards our brothers, we may be willing to make a temporary peace, but it's a temporary peace. It's qualified for the moment. It's not a lasting peace. That would be the general idea. So let's step back. It says in the opening line here, the fear of God, the greatest obstacle peace must flow across, has not yet gone. So in chapter 16, we learn that there are the course describes 4 obstacles to peace, and we're not going to go over them, but you take them one at a time. And the last and final obstacle before peace prevails is the fear of God, the greatest obstacle of them all. It really dramatizes in that chapter 16 the symbolic meaning of this interior journey that we make towards uprooting all the what the ego has planted in our mind. And the final thing to be uprooted is the fears, our own fears that we project onto God. So the rest are past. So it's speaking to us in this paragraph as if we have made great progress past the first 3 obstacles. The rest are past, but this one still remains to block our path and interfere with our full embrace of all that the Creator has to offer. And that gets reflected back into our relationships, all our relationships, not only to the Creator, but to everyone. And it describes it as here as something that comes and goes, temporary treaty. So I want to illustrate something that just popped into my mind. But perhaps I've had this experience several times, perhaps you have. And that is at a wedding. A wedding, not just the wedding, but the dinner afterwards, the celebration part of it, is always a wonderful thing, a coming together of 2 families and celebration and everything. And what I've noticed is during that time, I feel connected to almost everybody in the room. These are people I haven't even met. I feel like we're all on the same page. And then it's over. And maybe I don't see them again for a long, long time. It's kind of forgotten. It's like we had a temporary coming together only to be interrupted. And perhaps you have relationships either now or in your past that followed along this line where things were good for a while and then not so good.
The gap between you and your brother is not one of space between 2 separate bodies. And this but seems to be dividing off your separate minds. It is the symbol of a promise made to meet when you prefer and separate until you and he elect to meet again. And then your bodies seem to get in touch and thereby signify a meeting place to join. But always is it possible for you and him to go your separate ways. Conditional upon the right to separate, will you and he agree to meet from time to time and keep apart in intervals of separation, which do protect you from the sacrifice of love? The body saves you, for it gets away from total sacrifice and gives you the time in which to build again your separate self, which you truly believe diminishes as you and your brother meet.
I find this paragraph hugely insightful for what we're talking about. We really need to understand what they're saying here. So, first of all, the gap between your brother is not that you're in separate bodies. For instance, we're on a Zoom call, so everybody here, your body is in a different location than mine right now. So in the conventional world, we could view that distance and geographic distance as a gap. That is not the one that separates, that is not the gap. But the mind thinks of that as the gap. So what we're saying, in truth, geographic distance is not a gap between souls, but the mind represents the gap as physical distance between people. It's an important distinction, as we'll read. And so you have two ways of looking at it. One, from the view of the illusion that separate bodies are means that we are separate, and another from the view of truth. Let's look at it from the point of view of the illusion first. For here is where the fear of God is most visible. Okay, and that means that yes, you get in touch, you come together, perhaps you have a meeting, and it signifies a meeting place to join, and everything is nice. And then you go your separate ways, meaning you go to your homes or your different places in geography. And here's where the illusion kicks in. And it says, now because you're at a far distance from me, then we are separate. It insists that that is separation, and it gives you the time in which to build again your separate self. Most profound. When your body separates and you believe now you're alone or away from that other person, you can then reinforce the false notion of your separate self, which you truly believe diminishes when you and your brother get together and meet and share and connect. Okay, so that's what the illusion looks like. We'll look at the same situation through the lens of truth in a moment, but we want to first recognize the problem. The way it conventionally exists is people believe out of sight, out of mind would be, think about that. If you are out of sight, you are out of my mind. That's the belief there, that space represents a separate self. Any questions on that before we go on? Because seeing the illusion for what it is vital to deciding, well, maybe that's not. Maybe my beliefs in that are not so well founded. This would also apply to family members and loved ones who no longer are here in body form on this world. We would say they're gone, and they would in some ways seem to now be separate from us because we can't get together with their bodies in one place. So all this is quite well recognized in the human condition.
The body could not separate your mind from your brothers unless you wanted it to be a cause of separation and of distance seen between you and him. Thus do you endow it with a power that lies not within itself, and herein lies its power over you. For now you think that it determines when your brother and you meet, and limits your ability to make communion with your brother's mind. And now it tells you where to go and how to go there, what is feasible for you to undertake and what you cannot do. It dictates what its health can tolerate and what will tire it and make it sick. And its inherent weaknesses set up the limitations on what you would do and keep your purpose limited and weak.
Mhm. We are staring down the illusion here. It can be seen, if it can be seen here, it can be seen anywhere. So there's the error is not when our bodies move to different locations. That's not the error, because that's the way time and space works. The error is that we then endow that physical distance with a power that lies not within itself. This is a miscreation. It says that if I'm in one state and you're in another state, we are far apart. And then it goes on to believe that we cannot come together, that because of that physical distance, we are stuck with conditions of separation. Herein lies its power over you, because your mind has endowed this thought with a power that it doesn't not have, but because your mind has power, you gave your power away. In many ways, this is one of the clearest illustrations of what we mean by giving your power away inappropriately. It goes on all the time, but this illustrates it really well. The thought that I happen to know, let's see, I'm going to count I live in Florida, and I'm going to count the people that are on this call right now that are not in Florida. 1, 2, 3, 3. I don't see Mo on here right now. So I see, oh, I'm sorry, Julie's in Virginia. So 4 of you are in another state. Now, I could choose to believe, because of that physical distance, that our minds cannot come together, and that we're on different, that we're separate. And that's the illusion. And I can give that thought a power that lies not in the thought itself. And when I give that idea power, it then has power over me, because then it dictates a scenario of separate locations, separate bodies means separation. And from that cascade a whole series of beliefs and thoughts that say, well, since we're separate, then I must have my own private thoughts that are just mine alone, that nobody else is privy to. And a whole series of ideas that reinforce the ego's philosophy, all causing us to miscreate with the power of our mind. Okay, so that's the nature of the illusion.
The body will accommodate to this if you would have it so. It will allow but limited indulgences in love, with intervals of hatred in between. And it will take command of when to love and when to shrink more safely into fear. It will be sick because you do not know what loving means. And so you must misuse each circumstance and everyone you meet and see in them a purpose not your own. It is not love that asks a sacrifice, but fear demands the sacrifice of love. For in love's presence, fear cannot abide. For hate to be maintained, love must be feared, and only sometimes present, sometimes gone. Thus is love seen as treacherous, because it seems to come and go uncertainly and offer no stability to you. You do not see how limited and weak is your allegiance, and how frequently you have demanded that love go away and leave you quietly alone in peace.
Well, that the meaning here just hit me really strong as Satisha was reading. Let's handle the first half of this here. That when we buy into this belief of separate bodies implies separate reality, separate interest, then we wind up misusing our relationships. As it says here, misuse each circumstance and everyone you meet and see in them a different purpose, a separate purpose, which is not your true purpose, but see in them a distorted purpose that's based upon this belief in separation. And then, as a result of that, what is your view on love? In other words, if that's the foundation of your belief in reality and relationships, then what does love mean in that context? Well, it's a distorted view of love. And thus is love seen as treacherous because it seems to come and go and it offers no stability. And you see how limited and weak your love relationships are. This is distorted view of love, not obviously genuine love. And so it's a love that comes and goes, very fragile, very tenuous, not to be fully trusted. And here's the last thing. And so we wind up adapting to that distorted version of love and think that that leave me alone so I can be in my peace. This is the consequences, the ripple effects of these separate views of a separate self in separate bodies, separate from everyone else.
The body, innocent of goals, is your excuse for variable goals you hold and force the body to maintain. You do not fear its weakness, but its lack of strength or weakness. Would you know that nothing stands between you and your brother? Would you know there is no gap behind which you can hide? There is a shock that comes to those who learn their savior is the enemy no more. There is a wariness that is aroused by learning that the body is not real. And there are overtones of seeming fear around the happy message, God is love.
So this is, of course, speaking very frankly around the insight that when you realize I had it all wrong, I was building a concept of love and relationships based on a belief that two bodies had to be in the same room and in touch with each other. That was my basis of love. And when that is brought into awareness and rejected, there's a shock. This is the shock of making room for the truth that comes to those who learned they were believing in an illusion, a wariness that's aroused by learning the body is not the basis of your identity, and there are overtones of seeming fear around the happy message, God is love. I'm sure to explain it in the next paragraph, but the mind, the things that are new to the mind that it does not understand and is not experienced are innately greeted by fear to the fearful mind. Uncertainty of the future or of relationships or of outcome, a fearful mind will respond to those, even though they haven't happened yet, to those things with fear. And so making room for a new concept of love, a concept of God is love, has overtones of seeming fear around it only because the mind was fearful. Deeper point now. This is why the Course takes a half step in helping us to awaken, because a fearful mind is not ready to be greeted by unconditional love, because it will just transfer its fear onto the next thing that it becomes aware of, the next relationship. And so the Course first helps us to undo the fear and take a half step, which is the happy dream, which is holy perception, which is points us in the right path of the God of love, but brings us to the point we would call of inner peace, where the mind is no longer torn into two directions and is content and tranquil within itself. And from that intermediate state, the mind can then be introduced to unconditional love. It will no longer be in a panic when it's introduced to unconditional creative love.
Yet, all that happens when the gap is gone is peace eternal. Nothing more than that and nothing less. Without the fear of God, what could induce you to abandon him? What toys or trinkets in the gap could serve to hold you back an instant from his love? Would you allow the body to say no to heaven's calling? Were you not afraid to find a loss of self in finding God? Yet, can yourself be lost by being found?
Very deep, profound questions. We need to spend a moment to harvest the meaning here. So, we're not talking about the final step. We're talking about the intermediate step. What happens when the gap is gone? Tranquility, conflict is over. The mind being torn between creating and miscreating ends. All the false notions dissipate. This is central to what the Course does, is it removes the barriers. Nothing more than that, nothing less. When the fear of God is gone, it's natural that you would return to love, that you would turn towards the Creator as source. It is in your divine nature to be drawn back once again to the loving arms of the Creator. And then these questions at the end. Would you, given that that is before you, this inner peace where all the interference and the fear of God is gone, would you allow the body to say no to that calling? For in other words, would you prefer to hold on to your body-centric identity if you knew that by letting it go, you could find eternal peace? Would you say no if you were not afraid to find a loss of self in finding God. So this is really interesting. The ego illusion is that if you find God, you get obliterated in the infinity of God. It's often symbolized as a drop of water returns to the ocean. That drop of water is gone because it's lost in the awesomeness of the ocean. It's it's a belief in a loss of self in finding God. And a question, I'm not saying that that's what the Course teaches. I'm saying that that's what the fear is, that you would no longer exist as yourself. Now, we should clarify what we mean by self here. We don't mean ego self. We mean holy self. That it's the belief your holy self, it could be both, actually. It believes some version of self would be wiped off from reality were you to be absorbed into finding God. And the question at the end here, which is very telling, is, yet can yourself be lost by being found? You're supposed to realize, no, myself cannot be lost by being found. In fact, the self expands far beyond our current conceptions of ourself. It becomes illuminated and elevated and expanded and joined with all the principles of creation. So it's actually a finding of self. This very theme of losing oneself versus finding oneself will be explored in the chapters that remain here in the course. For it is part of the final reckoning. What's going to happen to me when all this ego is gone? What remains? It's a question mark. What remains after that? And we should not be afraid of it. We should realize that the Creator has a marvelous plan that's beyond the imaginings of mankind in store for us. David, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Jonica. Yeah, chapter 29 really is amazing. The only resistance is the ego resistance. The ego it's you're threatening the ego with death if you go to the Holy Spirit. So it is desperate. It will, you just be prepared. Ego is fear. So it will, when you make that decision, we all know there's that, ego resistance, which is incredibly powerful. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that, just to expect it.
Yeah, right. As it says, say no to heaven's calling in order to cling on to the ego. So true, David.
That's what the fear is. The fear of that you'll lose yourself if you anyway. Thank you.
Yeah. This on David's point, this is the loss, the fear of sacrificing self is the gigantic fear that the ego would use to keep us chained to the ancient prison, keep us locked into past views of ourself. Because without an understanding of what's going to happen to you after you lose your ego, then it's only natural that we would fill in our own illusions in its place. Bob?
Thank you, Jonica. I've been seeing, I believe the Holy Spirit's been showing me for a while, the opposite of myself is everybody, the capital self, and it's seeing them as myself. Like the holy encounter, as you see him, you see yourself. Anyway, it's just been very good for me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. And thank you, Bob. It's so true. It's we didn't get to that focus on that enough today, but we will, because that holy self that you're referring to, Bob, does not have one location in space. It's not limited to one household, one physical location. The holy self, there's a term that's borrowed from elsewhere, is non-local.
Okay.
Meaning it doesn't have a point location in space. It's a part of all creation. And we will be exploring that further in the chapters to come. So yeah, final comments. So that's the introduction to chapter 29. And a lot of it does center, and properly so, around the concepts of self. Now that we've come, according to what we read today, the first three obstacles have been addressed, but there's this final obstacle that seems to be a contention between either I'm going to survive forever or the God is going to survive forever. It's the illusion it can only be one of us can survive. And so that those illusions need to be examined and seen for how crazy they really are, so that we can discard them from our mind. And we'll do that in sessions to come. So I'll look forward to that. Look forward to connecting with you all. Atisha, thank you for your reading.
Thank you.
And thank you all for your attention. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you, Tisha. Thank you, everyone.
Everyone, bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
I just had the idea,